Right. So this morning we're talking about the church, the wonderful sacred mystery that it is. And I think, understanding our church and its mission in the world is pretty critical to who we are as Episcopal people, that we're very committed to having a mission in the world. So I'm going to just start by sharing the first video with you.
Church is simply the community of disciples who follow Jesus Christ. But it's not just the local church. Church is all the disciples everywhere, in all time and all places, who have followed and who will follow Jesus. When we talk about church in the creeds, we say that the church is one, holy, Catholic, and apostolic. I want to say a few words about each one of those four words. We say the church is one. That means that we Anglican Christians understand that because there is one baptism and one Lord and one faith, there is one church. And so in some sense, we see all Christians around the world as part of one global church. The church is holy. The church isn't just a voluntary society like a normal nonprofit organization or a do-gooder organization. The church is holy because we believe that the Holy Spirit leads us into all truth, that the head of the church is Jesus Christ, the chief cornerstone, that the church is a gift from God to us, and that God is imbued in the church in all places and in all times. We say the church is Catholic. That doesn't mean that we're saying that we're part of the Roman Catholic Church. It means Catholic with a small c, and that word really means universal. What that means is that church is bigger than us, and bigger than my preferences, and bigger than my local church. To say that we are Catholic is to say that we are part of a universal church, that we practice a faith that is the faith practiced by Christians around the world, that we practice a faith which is practiced by Christians in centuries past and in centuries to come. That there is a universal, complete faith that we practice, that we don't choose just part of it to practice or the parts that we like, but that we practice the whole faith, which is the same faith that Christians practice and teach around the world. And the church is apostolic. We say that this church traces its origins back to the apostles, that the practices that we have were taught by the apostles. In the book of Acts, we read about the church gathered for the breaking of bread and for the prayers, and we gather for the breaking of bread and for the prayers, that our faith is instituted by Jesus and his apostles. Anglican Christianity has one important understanding of church that affects our faith today. And that is that from the moment the church went to England, when Pope Gregory sent Augustine over to England in the 6th century, he was told to adapt the faith, if needed, to local custom, to make it relevant and meaningful to local people, but also to teach the universal faith once delivered. At our best, Anglican Christians have gone around the world and have met local people and have adjusted the faith. Maybe we sing different music, use local languages, local customs, local costumes, local traditions, but we also treasure and keep our universal faith. Now, we also have to acknowledge when we talk this way that the church has not always been at its best, and sometimes we've been colonizers who have disregarded local people and local customs and local traditions. And those are things for which the church must most certainly repent. But our ideal has been a holy one of adaptation for evangelical reasons, to spread the faith. The mission of the church is reconciliation, to reconcile us to one another and the world to God. Now, one of the questions that I get often when I start talking about the church is, well, why do I have to go to church? Isn't God everywhere? Well, in a sense, God is everywhere, but God is particularly present in and for the church. Churches, beautiful places like this place where I'm sitting now, are places set apart for us to know God, thin places for us to know and to experience God, places where we're focused on knowing God. But the very best reason I know to come to church is found in the letter to the Hebrews in chapter 10, where it says, "Let us not neglect to meet together as some do, but provoke one another to love and good deeds." We Christians are meant to provoke one another to be better Christians, to be more fully committed disciples of Jesus Christ. That's why we come to church.
Good morning. So after watching that little piece, I just have a question for you to think about. The church was described as one holy, Catholic, and apostolic. Do you have one of those after hearing the definitions? And if you need us to redefine that again, we can do that. Is one of those more important to you than another? Are you drawn to the one holy, the Catholic, or the apostolic?
Apostolic, I believe.
Thank you. Well, yes, thank you. Apostolic.
Yeah,
I just have a nit about the word Catholic, because as he said, that is maybe interpreted as Roman Catholic. And why can't they update the creed to say universal?
right.
Okay.
But
Well,
anyway,
I worry when I agree with Cara.
It
But
becomes a
I agree
teaching
with her on
moment, though,
that.
doesn't it? I'm sorry, it becomes a teaching moment, doesn't it? So
It
we
does.
understand the meaning of Catholic.
Right.
And so, people who are inquiring, you have the opportunity to speak about the word Catholic and what it means to you.
And
I
it's
happen to
all-
like it because it does mean universal. It means we're all one.
Right. And it's always written with a small c. So that should be a teaching point too.
well, it should be. but,
Well, maybe
yeah.
the Catholic Church should change its name.
I don't think that's necessary.
Oh, well.
So Deb, I saw you trying to get in there. Was there
Well,
something that you wanted to add?
apostolic, is the most, I guess, the most meaningful to me. But, he gave the definition about Catholic, and I still don't understand it. And I grew up in a Catholic neighborhood and was one of the few Protestants but so I don't know, whenever my friends would go to church with me, of course, they were Catholic, and they took that as really meaningful for them. Like, you're like this, stepchild. You're Episcopalian, so now you're you come from us, and you're, the stepchild. But so I've never really understood it. But I guess if it means universal, I never knew that.
Yeah,
See?
that is what that word means.
Yeah.
It's the apostolic part that appeals to me most, I think, knowing that this has been practiced since the apostles of Christ.
And comes down always from one apostle through a bishop, not till today. All our bishops follow from the apostles, and when they are consecrated by existing bishops who were consecrated by existing bishops. It's not something that just came out of nowhere. It goes
Right.
way back to the beginning of the church.
Right.
I think
I like one, the word one.
There you go.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Anna.
Okay, the word one, because to me, one of my first thought when I hear that we're all one, we're all together. The whole world is one in God, and that's may not be what it means there, the church in one, but that's what I look at it as being, that we're all one with God.
I agree with Anna, and I think that's one of the things I grew up Catholic, and it didn't matter if I was in, Cancun, Mexico, and celebrating Easter at the Catholic Church. I might not have understood the language, or in Europe, with my daughter traveling with her school, it was all the same. And I think the Episcopal Church follows those traditions, yet tailors them to the community, which I appreciate. So that oneness, it's grounding, I think. So.
Thank you for that, Tamara. I think it's good for those of us who have been in the Episcopal Church a while, and, compared to many of you, I still, feel like I'm somewhat of a newbie even to the Episcopal Church, though I think it's been, I don't know, I should go back and look, maybe 15 some years that I've been an Episcopal person. But the part that I appreciate most is that we're one, and that there is a oneness with God, and that one of the things I appreciate about the Episcopal Church is its commitment to honoring other faith traditions. And whether that's Buddhist or Hindu or some sort of Native American spirituality, whatever, or Judaism, we're not about conversion, like going out and saying you're wrong, you need to join us kind of thing. But with an understanding that there's one God, and we're all included in that. I like that idea. Someone talked to me about, and it's a phrase I often use, especially in my family, because Michael, my husband, works in a Catholic church, that it's the same God, different buildings. It's also different practices. That's why I'm in this building, so to speak. But even in this church, it's a broad tent. And there's room for many of us under this tent. And those are all things I just love about the Episcopal Church. I'm going to move us to the next one.
So how is the Episcopal Church organized? This is a natural question for people who are new to the church, or maybe you weren't paying attention to all the different layers. The first thing to know is that the Episcopal Church avoids two extremes that are sometimes found in other Christian traditions. There are churches out there that are fully and completely democratically governed, that when a question has to be decided, the members of the church gather and vote on matters, and the clergy and all the people who work at the church are there to serve all the people who can cast votes in that assembly. On the other extreme, there are churches out there that are completely hierarchical, and a group of people, perhaps bishops, runs things and makes the decisions and simply tells people what has been decided, and that's how a church might run. Our church balances these two opposites very carefully at all levels. congregation is probably organized with a rector or a vicar, a priest who governs the church, who has particular responsibilities for things, and by a vestry. And a vestry is a committee like a board of directors that has a special care for the temporal affairs of the church, but are also meant to be spiritual leaders. There are certain decisions that are delegated by our church to the priest. Decisions about worship, for example, or how the church building is used, technically belong to the priest, although most priests will consult their vestries. And the vestry has delegated certain responsibilities, like attending to the buildings, making sure the insurance is paid, and so forth and so on, although vestries usually consult with others. And typically, the priest is the head of the vestry and leads the vestry meetings. Nearly all Episcopal churches also have an annual meeting where the church gathers and anyone from the church can come. It's a public meeting and hear what's happened important in the life of the church in the last year, what's coming up, hear about the budget of the church, and elect people to various positions. And so the vestry are elected by the congregation. So it balances top down and bottom up. That church elects people to represent it at the diocese. So let's talk about a diocese. This is a geographic area that's organized. It might be a whole state or part of a state, and it's a whole bunch of congregations who are led by a bishop. That bishop works with various committees to lead the diocese, and certain powers are delegated to the bishop, and certain powers are delegated to committees. And lots of things require both the concurrence of bishops and the committees. That diocese, every diocese, has an annual meeting of some kind. It might be called a convention or a council, at which important decisions for the life of the diocese are made. And the people who attend are the clergy of the diocese, the priests and the deacons, and also all the people who are elected by the congregations. So it's clergy and lay people. That annual meeting elects people to go to something called General Convention, which is how we're governed at the church-wide level. The Episcopal Church is in 16 countries or so, and every 3 years we gather for something called General Convention, at which 4 priests or deacons from every diocese come, and 4 lay people from every diocese come. And there are a little over 100 dioceses, and they all gather, and all the bishops of the church come as well. So there's a house of bishops and a house of deputies, which is the clergy and the lay people. And kind of like Congress, anything that the General Convention passes has to be agreed by the bishops and by the deputies, the clergy and the lay people. And so all of the decisions at the church-wide level involve lay people, priests, deacons, and bishops. So we're a church that involves everyone at that level of governance. The General Convention makes decisions that govern our worship life, but also decisions, rules that protect people from abuse or from violations by other people. They help us decide what saints we remember. All sorts of decisions are made at the church-wide level, and it's quite a festive cosmopolitan gathering with people from lots of nations speaking lots of languages, all working on our common life together. And of course, the Episcopal Church also has various committees that work. Our committees on liturgy, committees on our rules, all sorts of special committees that make decisions for us. Sometimes people ask, well, is there a headquarters? Is there an office? And the answer is yes. We have a headquarters building in New York City, and lots of staff work there, but we also have staff all over the United States and indeed around the world to serve our common life and to provide resources that help your local church carry out its life and its ministry. The important thing to take away is that in the Episcopal Church, especially if you're a lay person, you have a voice and an important part to play. You can exercise your voice and your vote in the local church, potentially at your diocese, and if you're elected, at the General Convention of the Episcopal Church, where you can help shape the common life of the entire Episcopal Church. But we also have bishops who guard the unity of the church, and so we balance this bottom-up and top-down approach.
Well, I wanted to take time because I think that's an important part of the Episcopal Church, and I want to take time for people to respond to that or ask questions about that. One of the questions that the authors pose to us about this particular video is, in your church governance here at Nativity, we balance two opposing values, hierarchy and democracy. What are some of the gifts of this balance, and what are some of the challenges? And you can respond to that question, or you can just respond to any part of that video. All right, I'll take my collar off, you guys. Talk. I have to say, like, one of the things that they commented on is that the priest is responsible, the rector is responsible for running the vestry meeting. That has never been true in my time here. And I don't even know if my predecessors did it that way or not. I think I just came in when I came here as a priest in charge before I was asked to be rector, working with a senior warden, and we just worked hand in hand, the junior and senior warden, when I got here. And I've really always felt a real team approach here at Nativity. I hope that's other people's experience, but we have had just amazing wardens and an amazing vestry. Each time I've had a vestry, each year there's been a vestry to work with. So for me, I can't imagine being in a church that's leadership is hierarchy.
I had to smile when he said that, usually run by the clergy, the priest,
Yeah.
because that's never been the case in our meetings. Although, of course, you are looked to for direction and guidance and all that kind of good stuff. But yeah, it's something the laity does to sustain the church. We all have a role, and certainly the people in the congregation are skilled enough, to handle some parts of it. And those parts that we should.
Yeah, like I'm just thinking, like our latest vestry meeting, talking about our insurance and getting our roof repaired and getting our insurance to pay out on that, and needing to know what direction to go to make that happen. And we have people on our vestry who are very knowledgeable about those things. There's so many things that you don't learn in formation for priesthood, like how to fix toilets and just all those things. But they're all important because sometimes you're in the building alone and you got to figure it out. But I've always had, like, Gary DeMars when he was here, or Pete or Adrian. Always people just a phone call away. Just say, okay, this is happening. What do I do? When a furnace has gone out, like things like that happen. And I don't know the first thing about those things. So, but also I think there are a lot of lay people in our congregation who also are very religiously educated and who have developed their personal theologies. And I look to those people often for leadership, whether that's leading a small group, leading an adult forum on a particular topic. Some of you have done some of those adult forums. Some of you have
the sermons, the laity doing sermons is refreshing, and it's good to hear from a new voice.
Yeah, exactly. I think so too. So there's a question in the chat. Coming from the Catholic Church, I'm used to titles, father, sister. Are we supposed to address me in a certain way? I think.
Not father.
No. I just go by Dana, and I guess when I'm in professional circles outside of the parish, I might get referred to as the Reverend Dana. That's officially our titles as priests is the Reverend. And it is the Reverend. I thought it used to be just Reverend, but it's the Reverend. And so that's the title that I would get referred to if I was like maybe at a, like sometimes I've led the prayer for the state legislature or things like that. And so in those cases, that's how I might be introduced. I prefer in the parish to be called Dana. Some of the children here, because there are parents who want their children to use titles, they might call me Pastor Dana or they might call me Miss Dana. And I'm fine with either. Mother Dana doesn't quite feel right to me. Though I know Mother Letha, who is a priest in our diocese, and she is by all means fills that word. Letha took on a community that was Hmong and worked at learning their language and saying their service in Hmong. And anyhow, I know her to go by that title, but it very, very much fits her. So your children can call me by my first name, or if you prefer a title, Pastor or Miss is fine. I love the fact that the laity actually get more votes than the clergy. And I love the process of electing a new bishop, which we did last year. And I just love all that.
I think it in reality is about as democratic as you can get, because you have people who have made the theology and the liturgical end of the church their mission and their role in life as priests, as deacons, as bishops. And they do need a voice in leading us, because some of us, no matter how long we've been, quote, studying, we have not been studying in that same grain of education. And so we can't be expected to have the same knowledge and the same guidance from the Spirit as somebody who has studied for all those years. So I like the fact that both arms of the church have a role in our governance.
Me too.
I'm going to move on to the third video. Thank you for that sharing. Okay, I'm not doing something quite right this morning. To figure out what that is.
Dana, if you have more than one screen, whatever you want to show has to be pulled onto the screen that's.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I don't know. I'll try that. I'll try just hitting my Google when I get there. I'm so surprised that it's black. Like I don't know what to do. It's throwing me. So thank you, Erin, for kind of coaching. Yeah. I lose that whole thing. So I'm still.
There you go.
There we go. I know this isn't the right one.
Okay.
So how is the Episcopal Church organized? This is a natural question for people who are new to the church or maybe weren't paying attention to all the different layers. The first thing to know is that the Episcopal Church avoids two
calm down.
extremes that are sometimes other.
Take a breath.
There are churches out there that are fully and completely democratically governed.
I found sometimes if I
When a
was
question has to be decided, the
computer,
members of the church gather and vote on matters, and the clergy and all the people who work at the church are there to serve all the people who can cast votes in that assembly. On the
There you go.
I'm so sorry. I think
One of the great things about being a Christian is that we are never alone. We have God with us always, Jesus who came to be among us so that we would never be alone. We are surrounded by the church, the people in our local community, the people in our diocese, and the people in the Episcopal Church who are companions in our journey. And we are also surrounded by the communion of saints. Now, saint is a multivalent word in the Episcopal Church. In one sense, it means all faithful people. So when we say the communion of saints, we mean the people next to us in the pew, the people in our families and our friends in our church. But saint has also, from the very earliest times, been set aside to have a particular meaning, often with a capital S, saint, to mean someone who lived an extraordinary life of faithfulness and holiness. So the church has set aside certain saints, like St. Francis or St. Mary Magdalene, and has observed days when we remember them so that we are pointed towards their example and we can learn what the life of faith looks like lived out in real time. Now, the saints function in a lot of ways for us. They are teachers, quite frankly. They show us what a faithful life can look like. They teach us about what it means to follow Jesus, sometimes even to death. They teach us the history of the church. When we look at the communion of saints, we see people who have lived in very different times, in very different places, and in very different circumstances, and who have all found ways to follow Jesus in their place and in their time. Saints are not remembered for being good people or for being famous. Saints are remembered for being people who pointed beyond themselves to Jesus Christ and him crucified. Saints are also companions, and this is an important thing. The book of Hebrews tells us that we are surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses, and it means the saints, both those who are here with us now and those who have died and gone before us. We believe that when we die, life is changed, not ended. And so the saints are real and present to us, even if they lived centuries ago. They are companions cheering us on in our journey of faith. One of the questions I often get is whether or not in the Episcopal Church we pray to saints. If saints are companions with us in our journey of faith, what does that mean? And the truth is that the answer is yes and no. We do pray to saints, but not because we believe saints are closer to God or are more heard by God. We ask saints to pray for us in the same way that you would ask a beloved friend to pray for you, that they can be companions in prayer for us. Some particular saint who is your patron, who shares your name or your birthday, or who has a life circumstance with which you identify, might be someone you ask to join you in prayer. The saints are in the nearer presence of God, and they can be our prayer companions in this life. So how does someone become a saint? The important thing to remember here is that the church does not make saints. The church recognizes those whom God has made saints. In the Episcopal Church, we recognize and set aside certain people as saints using the General Convention, our gathering, our church-wide body that meets every 3 years. In order to be recognized as a saint, we have certain criteria, qualifications a person might have. We say that they need to have been dead at least 50 years so that we know that their example has stood the test of time. And we say that they need to be an extraordinary example of holiness, somebody who really points us to Jesus and gives a witness that maybe nobody else can give about what faith looks like. But the General Convention, bishops, priests, deacons, and lay people decide together Who are those extraordinary examples of faithfulness that we observe and remember, and sets certain days in the church calendar, often the date of the saint's death, when we remember that person? And they give us readings and prayers that we can say that help remind us what in that person's life points us to God. In the past few years, the Episcopal Church has had a lot of changes in our sanctuary calendar, and that can be really confusing. The important thing to remember is this: our current sanctuary calendar is Lesser Feasts and Fast 2018. You can Google it and find it online, or find it on the Episcopal Church's website. But that is the current calendar of the people who we have agreed together show us an extraordinary example of what a life of faith can be.
There we are. Is that surprising to anyone? That the Episcopal Church also recognizes saints, that the Catholics aren't the only ones. Roman Catholics, I should say.
Except I think that perhaps the Episcopal Church does a better job, maybe, of recognizing that the people in the church are also saints with maybe a small s and not a capital recognized by the church saint. Maybe.
I think it, probably depends on the pastor of a particular Catholic congregation, how that person lives out their theology. I know a priest who wrote St. George and the Dragon. His name is Edward Hayes, and he writes wonderful books. And the book about St. George and the Dragon, he refers to him as Saint George and the Dragon, and that we are all saints, but we also are all sent. And I really like that. It's a great book. Yeah.
I know in the Catholic Church, oftentimes the saints have to have so many miracles attributed to them. Is that something that crosses over?
No, it's not. There are different requirements in the Roman Catholic Church, but yet even those requirements, they're not following. One of the popes, I think they made John Paul II a saint, and he hasn't been dead 50 years. And I don't think there are any miracles attributed to him.
I thought Mother Teresa also came in under 50 years.
Probably. I don't know about miracles being attributed to her. There may be.
I didn't know the 50-year rule because I know very recently they are making this boy a saint, but he only died 15 years ago.
Is that the young man that's incorrupt?
Yes.
Yeah.
Does that have different rules then?
No, I don't know why. I don't understand why they're not following those rules. In the Roman Catholic Church, it's 100 years, not 50.
Oh,
Wow.
And I don't know why they're not following those rules. And I do know that story about that. Yeah, I think he's like in his early 20s or late teens. And there are miracles, attributed to him. Yeah, I don't know why they're doing that.
Were you thinking of something, Tamara?
I like to think about the communion of saints and the cloud of witnesses when I'm at the table and we're celebrating Eucharist and we are singing the Sanctus, the Holy, Holy, and we pray for the communion of saints who gather with us. And sometimes it feels a little crowded. And I like that feeling. It's like I'm just aware of people's spouses and children and mothers and fathers who are with us. and brothers and sisters and babies that weren't full term and babies who were full term. I mean, whatever the case, that we are all gathered there. And I always just kind of hope that the people in the pews feel comforted when we speak of the communion of saints being with us. So when you hear those words, you might think about who's your party, who showed up for service with you on a given Sunday. Is that a time for you to reconnect with your spouse or to reconnect with your father or whatever the case may be?
Tamara, you're muted.
Oh, yeah, for some reason we can't hear you. Okay. I want to we have just a couple minutes left. We're not going to get to watch the last video this morning. We'll get to it next week. And there's one more section that we're going to do next week. I just want to invite you to Wednesday nights. There hasn't been publicity about Wednesday nights, and that's because I haven't been able to be on the ball enough to get it to we have an incredible communications team. And so I want you to know that on Wednesday night, if you'd like to come from 7 to 8, last week, I did kind of a spiritual skills opportunity for people to learn about practicing different ways of practicing Lectio Divina. And we again watched a video regarding the theology of the cross with Richard Rohr. This coming week, we will see how the Spirit moves me, because honestly, that's kind of how I'm living my life, is pretty much at most 2 days at a time. But after Easter, we're going to do a series on the church in terms of what are we called to, especially now that we will never be the same again. And how will we be church in this new reality that we face? And the video series was created, I believe, not with post-COVID in mind, but so much of what they're saying about how are we relevant in the world as a Christian community, I think is just so right for us. And my dream would be that, most of our faith community would show up and do this 6-week series, and we'd get every core team there and every minister there, because I would hope it would reinvigorate people and help people's imaginations to be lit on fire. And so anyhow, I invite you to do, after Easter, we're going to do that on Wednesday nights. But this coming Wednesday night and the Wednesday of Holy Week, I will still be doing some Wednesday night with the work of the people.
Really? Well, thank you.
Yeah. All right. Anything else this morning? I'm going to find out how to actually download these videos onto my computer and see if I can share them out. I know some people have wanted to spend more time with the videos and rewatch them, and that you wouldn't have to then go through YouTube and watch all the chit chat in between, and you can just go from video to video. So I will take care of that, but just let me know if you're one of those people who wants me to forward the video series to you. I will see if I can do that. All right. I'll see you in worship, I hope.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.